On this Monday night, gridlock and protest in Ottawa.
We won't give in to those who fly racist flags.
As MPs resume work, the disruption in the nation's capital continues. Ottawa's mayor says it's time they moved on. Plus, the tense blockade at an Alberta border crossing.
We're just simply not ending it. We're not compromising our stand.
Do you feel safe?
No safe.
Canadian forces on the move in Ukraine.
We are repositioning some of our troops.
And a stunning shift in soccer power.
A goal for the entire country!
How Canada's team has become one of the hottest in international soccer.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
This is the nation's capital, still a parking lot of trucks and blaring horns in front of Parliament Hill. Some of the scenes are disturbing. As for a third day, the so-called Freedom Convoy is disrupting the city, restricting access for residents, workers and businesses. There's anger about vaccine mandates, but also a grab bag of other grievances, hatred of the Prime Minister, even some Nazi flags and desecration of monuments this weekend. The Prime Minister agrees it is frustrating. COVID is still dominating our lives. He himself tested positive this morning and is isolating. He says he has no symptoms. The right to protest, he says, does not include abusing, intimidating, and harassing people.
Freedom of expression, assembly, and association are cornerstones of democracy, but Nazi symbolism, racist imagery, and desecration of war memorials are not. It is an insult to memory and truth. Hate can never be the answer.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Most truckers, like most Canadians, are vaccinated, and many public health restrictions, including proof of vaccination, mask mandates, and capacity limits, are put in place by the provinces, not the Prime Minister. Yet the focus of this anger is Ottawa. The city's mayor says it's time for the protest to move on. Abigail Bimman has our top story tonight, and a warning, some of the images in it may be disturbing. Abigail?
Some people have left since Saturday, but there are still hundreds of vehicles and thousands of people here. There's also a more visible police presence Monday, and the impact extends past here on Parliament Hill, with a school, Central Mall, and a number of businesses closed.
A weekend of this continued Monday. Blaring horns, streets blocked by vehicles on Parliament Hill and into the downtown core.
Many residents have not slept for days due to the noise and disruptions, and many have been shut in due to the crowds, a lockdown imposed by the protest itself.
We've had to call in police and try to have people removed from the lobby. It's gotten that aggressive, but that's in the minority.
That's the message from many truckers, too, who don't condone defacing the war memorial or flying hateful flags and say that behavior is contained to a minority of extremists.
I want to apologize to the residents. I understand it's an inconvenience and our horns aren't quiet, right? But, I mean, in order to forge ahead, we're doing it peacefully.
We are here lovingly, and we are here for the children.
The big question, of course, how long will these protesters stay here? If you ask these truckers, no one's really sure, although some point out vaccine mandates mean they don't have a job to go back to, so no one's in a real rush to leave.
We're not going anywhere, and we just want our laws back. We want the mandates to end, and we want people to go to work without the fear of losing their job.
While people living in the chaos want their lives back, too.
Garbage, the urination, defecation, really takes its toll. Has a real mental health effect on people. You just feel uneasy. It's just not anything we have ever witnessed.
Protest organizers who have raised $9 million on a GoFundMe have not responded to interview requests from Global News.
And you take the caging bolts with you.
One tweeted this instructional video to help prevent trucks from getting towed if the driver leaves their rig.
Ottawa's police chief says the situation is scaling down, and so far there have been no injuries, deaths, nor riots, something the city's mayor calls a remarkable achievement. Ottawa police have several criminal investigations open. The chief says in the next 24 hours they're going to be launching a hotline to report hate incidents, suggesting that all this won't go away anytime soon. Donna?
Abigail in Ottawa, thanks. Well, members of Parliament were among those who had to navigate their way through the disruption and get back to doing what they were democratically elected to do. The House of Commons resumed sitting today. Eric Sorensen reports on how that unfolded and the Prime Minister's message to protesters.
The first challenge for MPs today, could they get to the office, the House of Commons? There was much heavier police presence around West Block. MPs returned not only to get back to the people's business, but for the symbolic importance.
I think it is important in a democracy to show that we would be there.
Folks like this are not going to stop me from doing my job.
But it was a nervous time for some MPs navigating through crowds that have been raucous.
It's worrying to come into work. I had to walk in with my staff and I was worried about them. I was worried about, safety of people that are coming to the Hill to do their jobs.
The Prime Minister was not in. He now has COVID along with his 2 children, so is isolating.
I feel well and have no symptoms.
But his message to protesters encircling Parliament was blunt.
We are not intimidated by those who hurl insults and abuse. There is always a right to protest peacefully that I and others will defend fully as part of this democracy. There is not a right to incite violence, to perform acts of violence.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The chamber, where Canada's political differences are hashed out, did resume without disruption. The opposition leader's first question: would the PM meet with specific protesters, namely the truckers who want border vaccine mandates dropped?
Will the Prime Minister move past the division and agree to meet with some of the truckers impacted by his federal regulations?
But Trudeau had made clear he would not meet with the protesters and he will not back off vaccine mandates.
The best way through this pandemic is to get people vaccinated. That's how we end the disruptions to our supply chains caused by this global pandemic.
One Conservative MP was happy to address demonstrators, not supporting those with extreme views, but those fed up with the restrictions.
I'm a supporter of what their message is, and that's freedoms and the mandates.
Anti-vax Canadians and those opposed to all mandates represent just a small percentage of the country. In political terms, the government has seldom found itself with an issue so one-sided, an issue this Liberal government is quite comfortable debating. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Ottawa.
Hundreds of vehicles are jamming roads in Coutts, Alberta. A blockade at the U.S. border is into its 3rd day. Protesters are demanding an end to COVID-19 restrictions, including those vaccine mandates. Police say they are trying to negotiate a resolution. And as Heather Yourex-West reports, patience is running thin for those caught in the middle.
They began arriving on Saturday, dozens of trucks and other vehicles lining up at southern Alberta's busy Canada-U.S. border crossing.
What we'd like to see is everything go back to the way it was in 2019 before all this started. All the mandates lifted, all the restrictions gone, and that put into legislation so this does not happen again.
Over the weekend, an Alberta government MLA joined the protests, sharing on social media, "I brought the grandkids down to the Coutts border today to show them the importance of standing up for freedom and liberty."
This is going to be an issue that our caucus needs to talk about. I think disappointed that Grant Hunter made the decision to go there and participate in that illegal blockade.
The blockade must end immediately, Kenny said on social media Sunday, before adding operational enforcement decisions are the responsibility of police services. RCMP say they're working to bring about a peaceful resolution, but protesters aren't backing down.
It's important to note that not every truck stuck in this lineup is a part of the protest. In fact, we spoke with a number of truckers who are now stuck here and just want to get home.
I'm stuck like about 3 days. No shower, nothing, anything.
Do you feel safe?
No, anybody, no safe.
Carrying loads of goods intended for Calgary grocery stores, several truckers tell Global News they feel like hostages caught up in a blockade that does not represent them.
I'm carrying produce from Sacramento, California to Calgary. I crossed the border on Saturday. I'm over 40 hours right now here, stuck in the just crossed the border.
If they have a freedom not to vaccinate, where's my freedom? I support them, but I'm the one who's stuck here. Who's suffering? Me?
By Monday afternoon, some of the truckers trapped in the protest were allowed to return to Calgary via a back road, unable to complete their American-bound deliveries as originally planned.
RCMP say they continue to negotiate with protest organizers to try and find a peaceful resolution to this border blockade. But police warn that if one cannot be found, they will move in and remove protesters by force if required. Donna?
All right, Heather Yourex-West, thanks. Now to the crisis in Ukraine. Prime Minister Trudeau is defending his government's decision to send non-lethal equipment only to support the Ukrainian military.
The fate of Ukraine matters to the world and to Canadians. I've made this very clear, including directly to President Zelensky.
The Prime Minister took part in a debate in the House of Commons tonight about Ukraine. He said there will be costs and severe consequences if Russia invades, including coordinated sanctions. Other allies, such as the US and the UK, have sent defensive weapons to Ukraine. Today, Canada's Defence Minister Anita Anand met with her Ukrainian counterpart in Ukraine, and Canadian military trainers already in that country were moved away from a volatile region. Crystal Goomansingh reports from Ukraine.
Canada is stepping up its efforts to train Ukrainian soldiers, extending Operation Unifier by 3 years. However, trainers on the ground now near contact lines in the Donbass region are being pulled back.
Minister, you're moving Canadian forces west of the river. What information do you have that prompted that change?
The safety and security of the armed forces is my top priority at all times. And out of an abundance of caution, we are repositioning some of our troops.
It's not known if Canadian officials have new information about a potential Russian threat in eastern Ukraine. The Ukrainian military has battled Russian-backed separatists there since 2014. A ceasefire is in place but is often violated, including Monday when a Ukrainian soldier was killed by an anti-tank grenade.
Russia has threatened to take military action.
At the UN Security Council, Russia tried unsuccessfully to block diplomatic dialogue.
Fellow members of the Council and other UN member states, we urge you to assess not only Russia's statements, but their actions with clear eyes.
I have clear instructions from my government to reiterate today the absence of any aggressive intention, as well as Ukraine's strong commitment to peace.
In the Russian parliament, there will be a vote in 2 weeks over whether to formally recognize areas within Ukraine's borders now controlled by pro-Russian groups as independent states. More destabilization, says Ukraine. Russia could then use these regions to build up military assets. Russia's ambassador to the UN blasted the West for stoking fears of war.
The discussions about a threat of war is provocative in and of itself. You are almost calling for this. You want it to happen. You're waiting for it to happen, as if you want to make your words become a reality.
NATO countries have clearly stated that peace is their goal. However, preparations are continuing for a conflict. Those military trainers being relocated, and soon non-essential staff at the Canadian Embassy will be leaving. A move the Ukrainian president last week vocally opposed, saying his country is not the Titanic. Donna?
Crystal Goomansingh in Kyiv tonight, thanks. A failure of leadership in the UK. Coming up, what a report into lockdown parties at Number 10 says about Boris Johnson. That long-awaited report into lockdown parties held at Number 10 Downing Street is out, and it is not flattering to Boris Johnson. A senior civil servant says there was excessive consumption of alcohol and a lack of leadership. And today his political opponents went on the attack.
By routinely breaking the rules he set, the Prime Minister took us all for fools. He held people sacrificing contempt. He showed himself unfit for office.
The police are still investigating and say they've obtained more than 300 photos of potential rule breaking. Redmond Shannon reports on the evidence and the political pressure on Johnson.
Will you take responsibility, Prime Minister?
After 2 months of media reports about lockdown parties at Downing Street and UK government offices, it's now official. An initial civil service report highlighting an excessive consumption of alcohol not appropriate in a workplace at any time. It says some events should not have been allowed to take place and that there were failures of leadership and judgment. A full detailed report won't be submitted until the police finish investigating. They have plenty of evidence to get through.
Well over 500 of pieces of paper, about a ream and a half we received, and over 300 photographs.
I now come to the statement. Prime Minister
Johnson, defiant, told angry MPs he will make changes within his office.
And I'm sorry for the things we simply didn't get right, and also sorry for the way that this matter has been handled.
There can be no doubt that the Prime Minister himself is now subject to criminal investigation.
Criticism too from Johnson's own Tory backbenchers.
I gave a eulogy, and then afterwards I didn't even go to her house for a cup of tea. I drove back 3 hours from Kent to Staffordshire. Does the Prime Minister think I'm a fool?
So either my right honourable friend had not read the rules, or didn't understand what they meant, and others around him, or they didn't think the rules applied to number 10. Which was it?
Johnson had been scheduled to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin Monday about the crisis in Ukraine. That call was reportedly cancelled so he could deal with this crisis much closer to home. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
But that's unusual.
Ahead, Spotify tries to fix its tune over COVID misinformation. The pandemic has exposed a lot of opinion masquerading as fact and a lot of misinformation. Musicians like Neil Young have had enough. He and others have pulled their music from Spotify because of concerns it provides a platform for misinformation about COVID-19. That news sent Spotify shares sinking last week. They did rebound 12% today after U.S. podcaster Joe Rogan apologized and promised he'd be more balanced. Ross Lord looks at whether that's good enough for everyone.
By his own admission, Joe Rogan is as surprised as anyone. His show is among the more popular podcasts in the world.
We've opened the door to these new levels of power for the government.
But Rogan's accommodation of guests who suggest the pandemic is a conspiracy has blown up in his face, forcing him to promise more accountability.
I will do my best to try to balance out these more controversial viewpoints with other people's perspectives so we can maybe find a better point of view.
Damage control after criticism that hit like a hurricane. Rocker Neil Young pulling his music from Spotify because it decided to keep hosting Rogan's podcast. In Young's words, Spotify has become the home of life-threatening COVID misinformation, lies being sold for money. Others, including fellow Canadian music legend Joni Mitchell, have also pulled their songs.
I'm very sorry that they feel that way. I most certainly don't want that.
Young and Mitchell have deep respect for vaccines. Both contracted polio as children before immunization was developed for that deadly disease.
Don't it always seem to go at you? Don't know what you got till it's gone.
For Spotify, Rogan is a valued investment, under contract for $100 million US. The company is promising to add a content advisory to podcast episodes that discuss COVID-19, a move this Canadian tech journalist says is unconvincing.
Any podcast episode that has any discussion in and around COVID-19 will have this. But they don't really do anything about the actual spread of misinformation.
The backlash is still spreading. Quebec artist Gilles Vigneault is pulling his music from Spotify to show solidarity. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, who signed deals to produce Spotify podcasts, say they've been raising concerns to the company since last April and will keep pushing for change. Ross Lord, Global News.
Next, a battle of rivals. Canada's men's soccer team a step closer to the World Cup. Even if you're not a soccer fan, it is hard not to get caught up in the energy of the Canadian men's team. They are now a step closer to the World Cup, and they got there by beating their biggest and closest rival, the United States. Mike Dorley reports on what it took and what comes next.
For decades, soccer in Canada has largely been defined by heritage: Italian, French, Greek. The jerseys at patios and bars during major tournaments have been everything but Canada's. So what in the name of world football is going on here? Flags, flares, confetti and streamers? Have Canadians gone mad for soccer?
Getting off the bus and seeing how crazy it was, it actually feels like we're in a football country.
And that, it should be noted, was before the real frenzy. A win over the US that made qualifying for this year's World Cup a near certainty, when not so long ago it was only the stuff of fantasy.
3 years ago, it seemed like a long shot. 3 years ago, it seemed like a long shot. It's a story that is kind of defies logic sometimes when you think about it, when you just think about how rapid this ascent of this team has been.
The last time Canada qualified for the World Cup in 1986, they played the USSR. And while the women's team capped a generation of excellence by winning Olympic gold last year, it's been generations since the men were relevant. What changed? For one, manager John Herdman convinced rising stars like Alphonso Davies, who was injured and watched the game from home, that Canada could be a winner. It took a bit longer for the rest of Canada to buy in, but the timing couldn't be better.
People just see this team not just providing hope for wins and losses, but they see them as just an outlet for positivity, which, if we can be honest, is kind of in short supply these days.
And what could be more positive than this? Mike Trollet, Global News, Toronto.
We all needed that. That is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Vancouver. There are beautiful spots all over this country. Please email us yours to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.